Good morning, this is the Eager Beaver Show.
You are listening to a True North Eager Beaver Media Incorporated podcast. The True North Eager Beaver podcasts are proudly brought to you by our founding sponsors, the Misfit Mysteries from Corvid Moon Publishing, your source for science fiction, fantasy, and cozy mysteries featuring a broad diversity of characters, CanadianTarot.com, your uniquely Canadian online eclectic tarot community, and the Peppermaster, hot pepper sauces made from farm-fresh ingredients to thrill your taste buds and expand your mind. Well, good morning and hello, kids, and welcome to season 4 and episode number 593 of the Daily Beaver Morning Show. Still and always 100% Canadian, eh? I'm your host, the Eager Beaver, pronouns he, him, hey, Mr. Beaver, A. And with me, as always, is my good friend, Mr. Grizzly. Big thank you goes to our podcast founding sponsors, the Peppermaster, the Misfit Mysteries by Corvid Moon Publishing, and PsychicTarot.com. It's the day, I should say the day, shouldn't I? It is Monday, March 3rd, 2025. It's a nice day here at the Beaver Lodge. It's a particularly nice day here at the Beaver Lodge. For those of you who know that we've been having some slight issues with the neighbor because apparently somebody thought that you could actually move in a whole camper trailer and plug it into the side of the wall of the house next door and live in it all winter. Turns out that was not allowed, and the trailer was removed yesterday. So when I look out my window, I can actually see sky and not a trailer. So, yay! We're back to having the normal number of neighbors, and my beaver sweetie is not yet aware because he's in Toronto celebrating our niece's birthday. So I will have very, very, very good news that will make him very, very happy this morning when I talk to him. Okay, Mr. Grizzly. Before we go any further, how's your mental health today, sir?
It's a little bit better, to be honest with you. I'm
Good.
still far from even 50%, but getting better.
Getting better is good. We like that. We like that very much. Definitely rooting for you, my friend. Right. My mental health is pretty good. We had a beautiful weekend celebrating my niece's birthday and my nephew at a volleyball tournament right here in Kingston, so we didn't have to travel for it. The Venom Cobras, I am happy to report, have won the bronze medal at the tournament. Apparently, myself and Uncle Beaver Sweetie are good luck charms because when we show up, they win medals. Just saying. The beaver brings the bling. So yes, some good family time, and then my beaver sweetie went over to Toronto with them after the volleyball tournament to spend more time with family, and of course I was the dutiful beaver, so I remained home to make sure that everything was okay. So yeah, it's been a time with family, as always, very rejuvenating. So I am feeling quite well, and I'm hoping that all of you are feeling very well and have had wonderful weekends as well. Kits, especially Kit Mohan, who was celebrating birthday, and I hope it was fantastic. All right, let's get to the news. Interestingly enough, pretty much a slow news weekend in a way. However, there was something that happened on Friday that had
Yeah,
tongues wagging.
to say
Now
the least.
yes. Now we will not show you excerpts from that because number one, the Tangerine Tornado gets enough airtime as it is, and you'd have to have been living under a rock to not know what happened. Recently, I think it was last week at some point, we celebrated the 3rd year
We didn't celebrate. We
anniversary for
acknowledged.
well,
We
we acknowledged.
acknowledged.
Yeah, I know. Celebrate anniversary is kind of weird. We acknowledged the fact that it's been 3 years that the whatever it is that's happening in Ukraine started in earnest, because we can always look at the dates when they invaded Crimea before that, and when the full scale invasion happened. This war has been going on, either 3 years or a whole lot longer than that, depending on when you start counting. And what we saw in the White House is nothing less than clearly a shakedown. It was a 3-on-1 trap. Clearly, it was set up that way. If anybody watched the Saturday Night Live skit, saw the person that was doing Marco Rubio trying to sink into the couch. Some person online crudely remarked that if he was afraid that JD Vance might want to start to get a little frolicky with Marco, given how much he and the couch were becoming one. So, yeah. For Marco Rubio, this one's the hardest, right? Because he has the longer career of saying one thing and now swallowing himself whole. And he knows that this is not good. But clearly, this was coordinated. It was really WWE with the whole tag team and everything. You saw Trump, tap JD Vance's hand, and then JD Vance go in. And, oh my God, talk about drama queen.
Well, the world order, as we've known it since 1945, no longer exists.
Yeah.
The United States of America is not a friend and ally to anyone anymore. They stand alone. They basically want to get out of NATO. Go ahead. Go ahead. We'll find other trading partners. You guys are on your own. Your president has done this to you. He sided with Russia. He called Ukraine the aggressors who invaded Russia. None of that happened.
Yeah. Yeah.
This man wants to destroy the world order, and he just did it on Friday. He
Yeah,
did it. It's done.
The fig leaf of pretense is gone. I mean, and this is a man who, after calling Zelensky a dictator previously, not too long ago, when asked about it again, was like, "Did I say that?"
Yeah.
No wonder he
Trying
thinks
to
that
gaslight the American people.
Or he actually really doesn't remember because he's that far gone, because he also didn't remember he's the idiot who signed Kuzma. Can't believe some idiot signed that deal, sir. That was you. I don't remember signing that.
Well,
I don't remember saying that about Zelensky.
Here's
It's
the
like
footage.
It's like, but it's Biden's mental acuity that was a problem, right?
Yeah.
Gee. Okay. So we all saw that thing. Apparently, it was apparently it was some type of setup. Was a shakedown. Was an exercise in humiliation. Another instance of killing, not choking, the chicken to scare the monkeys. I've learned. It was a disgusting, embarrassing, cringe-inducing display that had everybody's hair standing on end because it was as cringe-inducing as it was frightening.
Well, and the amount of people that came out in defense of what he said is not only shocking, but truly disturbing, because they believe his lies.
Oh yeah,
it's truly disturbing. We have mass psychosis going on in the United States of America right now. I've never seen anything like it.
The great rewiring. Brains are being rewired.
Yeah.
Yep. The thing with this is that it was like everything in the kitchen sink, right? Is he wasn't dressed well enough. He hadn't said thank you recently enough for their liking. He didn't, as well as all the other stuff. I mean, it was any pretext.
Yeah.
It was good. Zelensky tried to accurately point out that if the states are making these decisions, things will happen to them. Don't you dare tell me what will happen to us. You have no power. Zelensky never said, I will make this happen. He's like, if it's raining and you go outside, you will get wet.
Mhm.
Don't say that you can make me wet. Pun intended. I'm not saying I'm going to make it rain. I'm just saying if rain is falling and you go outside while rain's falling, you will get wet. And apparently, Trump thought that this was some type of insult because, he doesn't listen very well and he just listens for keywords
Mhm.
like this and then reacts to the keywords. It was a disaster. It was a disaster, which, of course, had other little disasters around it, which, of course, led to a big meeting being called in Europe. I think the meeting was called by the UK, with whom there's also been a little bit of controversy with regard to us because apparently UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer had been asked point blank about Canada. And Trump starts to Canada and decided to sort of take a pass on commenting about that. And then the Buckingham Palace was asked about it, and they said something like, "These are the types of things we prefer not to comment on." You would think a kingdom would want to comment on the territorial sovereignty of one of its realms, but apparently not. Now, these are probably diplomatic choices. I mean, Keir Starmer made that decision before the thing with Zelensky
Mhm.
happened, and everybody turned around and said, "Well, do you understand why?" And to be fair, Justin Trudeau was recently asked when he was in Europe, and we will probably show you a little clip of that, about
Well, think about the
what he
significance
thought
of
about.
think of it the significance of his appearance there. It was a European security meeting,
Yes,
and they invited the Prime Minister of Canada
yes,
to attend.
yes.
Now, we technically share a land border with a European nation, and we have a 10-kilometer water separation between Saint-Pierre and Miquelon and the island of Newfoundland. So they're within our territorial waters. So we really should form an alliance with the European Union. I don't know if we join European Parliament or anything like that, but definitely we should align ourselves with Europe because they could be a pretty big trading partner.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, we already have a lot of the groundwork done on that part as well with CETA. But I've been seeing a lot more articles about that. Should Canada join the EU or collaboration? I've even seen people drawing flags, EU flags with all the stars and one maple
Mhm.
leaf on it, right?
Well, and consider this: the United States population is about 330, 340 million, something in that neighborhood. The entire population of Europe is 742 million. So there's more consumers,
Oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
or like 400 million.
Yeah, it would not be a bad move even if everything was going well with the United States.
Mhm, mhm.
Is be honest. So, but it's definitely much more of an important move now. But yes, he is there, and he is invited, and he actually got to address a little bit uh, around the table, and there's a clip of that going around, which seems to have really impressed a lot of people based on the buzz about it. And so that meeting happened. Um, and during there's a press conference after where the prime minister was directly asked about how he felt about Keir Starmer and how he felt, what message he'd like to take to Buckingham Palace and why it is he was seemed to be going out his way of not criticizing Trump specifically when speaking about what was said about Ukraine, what our position is with regard to Ukraine. I'm thinking that the prime minister is also sort of like, hey, the votes on March 9th for the new thing. It's the second yesterday. Yeah, you know what? My last week, I would like it to be as nice and sweet and peaceful as possible as I'm doing my, farewell tour around the world. So uh, I'm just going to speak about Ukraine. Thank you. And not mention his trash. I'm going to keep his trash name out of my mouth as much as possible. um, so you have all that happening, and in the meantime, Because you know that the leader of the opposition is going to be asked about this. So he decided to preemptively hold a press conference
Yeah.
in order to deal with that and to try out a few new attack lines and a few more defense lines, which we will go into, some of which are ridiculously hilarious
Mhm.
and completely unbelievable coming from him. But bless his heart, he's trying. And this all comes in the context of news that I had been waiting for quite a long time. Because, as you know, Kids and Cubs, if you had been following the show last week, I was very, very, very eagerly awaiting Sunday because I was pretty sure that something was going to happen on Sunday. And
Oh.
something did happen on Sunday that I thought was going to happen. On Sunday is the day when polling aggregator 338canada.com comes out with its weekly numbers. And this week's weekly numbers, well, we've been following for the last 7 weeks when the conservative fall started. Last week, we were at a spot where if the conservatives lost about 7 more seats or 6 more seats, they would slip into minority government territory. And I remember I kept on telling you there were 3 milestones: slipping into minority government territory, the point where the liberal and the conservative lines intersect on the graph and the liberals take the lead, and should it happen, liberals climbing into majority government territory. Milestone 1 has been achieved. The Conservative Party now, based on aggregate polling data, is no longer in majority territory. Kits and Cubs. This is the first of 3 milestones. Very, very important and very significant that this has happened. Pierre's press conference definitely had some color and texture given this. And one thing that is important to note is that Pierre's press conference came before the aggregate numbers were released. In fact, the aggregate numbers were released sometime like around 3:00 in the afternoon versus like 11 something in the morning. And his press conference was scheduled for 10:30 in the morning Eastern time. So the purpose of this press conference truly was to get ahead of this particular news, the polling news, and to try to create some counter programming for the day. And the counter programming for the day, of course, is an attack on Carney, because as I predicted, as these numbers get closer, the attacks will multiply and become more shrill and more strident. So yesterday was level 1. It started a little bit before. If you've been watching the hockey games, they got this one ad with Carney where they put like this red filter over everything. And of course, slow motion, stop cameras, when people are in their weirdest sort of things to make them look like evil incarnate.
Mm.
I'm sure you've seen that one. And of course, Carney is apparently now the person who is going to sell Canada out. Not conservatives who keep on trying to Americanize our politics, but Carney.
Well, I saw
Yeah.
a couple of the ads on the last night while I was watching the Oscars, and
Yeah.
wow, talk about getting creative with the truth.
Yeah. Creative is definitely a good choice of words.
I
There.
don't know how else to spell it. That's what it is. Creative with the truth, because it's just a whole bunch of bullshit. They pick and choose what they want you to hear. They don't tell you the whole story, and they never tell you the truth. Just like they love to repeat ad nauseum, and the balance will budget itself. If you read the whole quote, it would make sense.
Yes, indeed. Now, Mr. Grizzly, I just sent you a link, and in it there are 2 graphs that show you where things stand right now. there's the seat projection and the vote projection. We'll start with the vote projection, which is the second of the two images, if you see it there, Mr. Grizzly.
Mhm.
And last week, when we looked, there was a 10% spread in the vote projection. The Conservatives were in at 41 and the Liberals were in at 31. Well, this week we see a bit of a narrowing. The Conservatives down to 39 and Liberals to 33. So that 10-point gap has slipped to 6. Now, we knew that there would be a narrowing in that gap because over the course of the week, 5 polling companies had come up with new data, and every single one of those polling the companies, without exception, showed the gap narrowing between the two parties. So it was easy to predict that there would be a narrowing. Now, if we go to the seat projection, however, Mr. Grizzly, uh, you will see that that's a very, very sharp line up for the Liberals and a very sharp line down for the Conservatives. You will also know that the sharp line up for the Liberals is up way more sharply than the line down for the Conservatives
Mhm.
at this moment in terms of the slope of the line, if you remember mathematics back in the day. But here we see the Conservatives dropping below that majority 172 seat line to 160, and the Liberals up to 139 on the seat projections. That's a 21 seat difference. So all that's required now is an 11 seat swing, and the Liberals take over from the Conservatives. Neither will be in majority territory, but the Liberals will take over. You will also see that the seat ranges next to the numbers. The Liberals say 139 with a range of 107 to 172. The Conservatives 160 with a range of 125 to 193. This is the first time in quite a while that the seat ranges overlap between the two parties. There is no reason to suggest at this moment that this trend is going to stop, although this new attack on Carney from the Conservatives seems to be their way to attempt to stunt that or to blunt that. However, considering that this attack from the Conservatives is happening as this moment with Ukraine happened, and as tariffs are about to come, and as Ontarians are still reeling or celebrating, depending on who you vote for, from the Doug Ford thing, and people are getting ready or starting to vote already in the Liberal leadership race. I'm not sure how much bandwidth there is for Pierre this attack to try to land from Pierre.
No,
if we're looking,
he's shot himself in the foot too many times,
well, yes,
pinning everything on the prime minister.
But he's competing with a lot of other narratives. It's not like 2 years ago where there was only him
Right.
going on, right? And in the United States was relatively sane. Now he's
Relatively.
competing. There's very little oxygen for his message. So 7 weeks ago, 8 weeks ago, reporting periods ago, Conservatives were leading the Liberals by 201 seats. 7 weeks ago was 200. 6 weeks ago, 197. 5 weeks ago, 199, 191. 4 weeks ago, 157. 3 weeks ago, 121. 2 weeks ago, 91. Last week, 57. This week, 37. It's another 18-seat drop.
Yeah, it's big.
Following 4 of them of 34, 35, 30, and 34 in 4 successive weeks. As I mentioned, it's kind of hard for them to keep on dropping 30 seats per week because, at some point you're going to run out of seats to drop. And they do own the West. Still an 18-seat drop after 4 consecutive weeks of 30 seat or more drops is still a lot. And there are still some polling companies like Abacus that are still showing Conservatives leading by 12. So if there's more narrowing at Abacus over the next couple of weeks, that'll go away. That'll go a long way to taking care of some of that 18. And if the lead grows, right now there's only 2 polling companies showing the Liberals having the lead. So, with some of them like Nanos and whatnot, the gap is between like 3 or 4 or close to the margin of error. So, there could still be a 6-point swing in nanos to go from conservative +4 to liberal +2 and still be within the margin of error. That would reflect a lot in these numbers too, if should it happen. So things are not joyous right now in the conservative camp. Now, I don't know. I would assume that there is some panic, and there has been a while, given the moves that we've seen. This, I'm not sure how much they're panicking yet that their number officially has gone under the minority number. I would suppose that there would be a little more panic if they're maintaining a cool face, but panic under the water, because if the public numbers are showing this, and usually they had their internal numbers as much better quality polling, I cannot imagine that they have internal polling that is showing the opposite. This is an 8-week trend. They might have some polling that's saying, oh, no, we're not in the minority yet. We're still tapping in at 172, 73. Maybe they have something like that. But the aggregate of all the polling companies together, weighted to recency and quality and all that kind of stuff, says 160, which is 12 seats below majority. And they were at 201.
Yeah, they're completely
which was
defeated.
29 seats above majority.
Well, and again, remember, it wasn't so much they disliked the party as it was just leader fatigue. And people that believe the lies that have been told to them over the last number of years. And the social media machine, largely funded by Russian propagandists, along with some Indian ones and maybe some American ones, I'm not sure. But certainly a lot of propaganda over the last 7 or 8 years that people are starting to believe falsehoods, unfortunately.
Yeah.
The whole, he's a dictator. Really? Because if he was, could you make that accusation and still be, I don't know, a living, breathing human being?
Right.
Yeah, and here it's from PNC Bio. Ruby Dalla had internal polling that showed her winning. So people will believe what they want to believe.
Quote, neck to neck quote with Mark Carney.
It's like people will believe what they want to believe. Carney will quite possibly be the next Liberal leader. It's not a done deal. We don't know how people intend to vote. I also got to wonder about the folks who signed up with the intent to get Ruby Dalla elected. What are they going to do now? Like, who do they vote for now? Ruby and Chandra are gone.
And so is Christy.
Yeah.
Poor Brian.
Clark. Yeah.
Poor Brian Brereget.
So what are they going to do? You know?
Who
do they vote for?
The thing with this Brian Brereget character, Mr. Grizzly, what are the odds that in the same Liberal leadership race campaign, Christy Clark implodes, then Arya Chandra comes up, then he implodes, then Ruby Dalla comes up, and then she implodes, and all three of them happen to be successfully managed after one comes up and one implodes by the same guy who just happens to have been a Conservative candidate in the most recent BC provincial election. And all of this not involve something shady that someone with authoritative powers should look into. What are the odds? I'm not saying that there was something fishy that requires somebody with investigative powers to be looking into. I'm just asking questions about the statistical odds that one person would happen to manage successfully one after the other after they flame out three candidates that were all viewed as not being particularly legitimate in the same election race, and it all be completely above board simultaneously at the same time. I'm just asking a math question about probability. Anybody? Any mathematicians out there want to do the math on that one? I have a feeling it would be very low. It is statistically possible that all of this was coincidence and had no devious or nefarious master plan underneath it. I'm just thinking like the odds are like 0.00000002765% of that being the case. Maybe. I don't know. Yeah. There's some weird stuff clearly going on. Let's start with the prime minister, I think, because this will be better for us for now, and then we'll get into the Skippy stuff. So the prime minister did have a press conference after his intervention. And like I said, the intervention has been going across the web. It's quality. It really is quality. But so is this press conference, as is usually the case when the prime minister's on the world stage. He knows how to answer questions and do us proud. The first clip that I have is the one that I sent with a double star, Mr. Grizzly, at 2:51,
Yeah, just give me a
because
moment here.
the big question seems to be coming out of this is, well, with the United States doing what it is doing, and this big meeting came about, and in this big meeting that was held in Europe, um, probably not much of a surprise to anyone, but the countries that were there kind of agreed that territorial sovereignty is kind of an important thing, and this is a basic principle that kind of unites all democratic countries, and therefore we must stand for it, and that Europe would be doing more as they're going to craft their own plan to try to guarantee security for Ukraine in whatever way they can. Whether or not the United States participates or not, hoping that they will have the backing eventually of the United States, who for some reason thinks that they need to shake down Ukraine for the critical minerals, which is kind of weird because if you just help Ukraine defeat Russia, I mean, who's Ukraine going to want to sell its critical minerals to? The people that help them, right? So all of this is like completely unnecessary.
Mm.
To begin with, you would already have an in and a leg up. You don't have to shake them down. Or saying, "Well, we defended you, now you owe us." Because I don't remember us sending a bill to the United States for having shown up when they invoked Article 5.
And they're the only country to ever do it.
Yeah, I don't remember all of us saying, "Well, now that we helped you, you owe us. Pay up,
Hmm.
or else." I don't remember the rest of us doing that. Apparently that's what we do now.
Well, according to some people's thoughts.
Yes, apparently. So, do we have this one, Mr. Grizzly?
Oh, yeah, of course I do.
Okay. Being asked specifically about boots on the ground, and this is important because Pierre will ask about this too, and of course, you'll need to compare and contrast the answers.
Prime Minister Starmer said specifically it will mean UK boots on the ground and planes in the air. From your answer, I am taking that will not mean Canadian boots on the ground. Is that, just to finish, is that the case, or are you considering Canadian boots on the ground in the form of peacekeepers down the road?
Every step of the way, Canada has looked at the ways it can best help. And as I've said a few days ago, everything's on the table. We know that the Canadian military has ways that it can contribute. We're not going to get ahead of the discussions on how to keep a peace that isn't yet in place. But Canada will be there and is open to doing what is necessary, but those will be decisions taken in the coming years by Canadians and their government.
Dylan
All
Ross
right.
of the Canadian Press. Prime Minister, in your audience tomorrow.
So that's about the type of answer that we would expect right at this point, because there has been no decision to actually do something. So there's no point on saying that we would for sure. But he's not ruling it out.
Hmm.
He's not ruling it out. That's kind of important.
Well, I think it's something that's been on the table for quite some time now. Not a course that anybody wants to actually take, but I think that the consideration has been there for quite some time. Just haven't been public about it. And with the sudden reversal of or destruction of the world order on Friday, I think everybody's looking at things completely different now. It's not the same world it was when you went to bed on Thursday evening. It's all changed. And Trump he tore down 80 years worth of goodwill and agreements between nations. He literally tore it up and threw it out. So where we go from here is yet to be determined, but I can guarantee you that every scenario is now being considered.
Yeah. He's later asked about the impending audience, but at the time, impending audience he was going to have with the king, which is probably his last tete-a-tete with the king during his prime ministership, and asked about the prime minister of the UK, Keir Starmer's pass on answering directly, and states that Mr. Starmer has said things in the very recent past in the House and all that kind of stuff, so he goes by that. And whatever, this boilerplate answer for stuff with the king, right? Was because, a leader never talks about what they talked about with the king specifically, like in general rules, but, never really relate specifics from those types of conversations. We then go to 453, Mr. Grizzly, and this is the meat of this. It lasts about 3 minutes. And this is the meat where Canada stands with regard to Ukraine and President Zelensky.
Tom Perry, CBC. You had some time, we saw today, to talk with President Zelensky. I'm wondering what you can tell us about what you discussed, and I'm specifically curious whether you spoke about his encounter with President Trump and Vice President Vance on Friday.
Obviously, I spent a lot of time with Volodymyr Zelensky over the past years. We had a great sit-down just last week when I was, a few days ago, when I was in Kyiv to talk exactly about how much Canada stands with Ukraine unequivocally and always, and how much we stand and support him personally as a president, as a leader, as someone who has devoted himself to protecting Ukrainians and indeed protecting the principles and rules that underpin all of our democracies. I have continued to emphasize to him that Canada will always stand with Ukraine.
You clearly admire President Zelensky, so I'm wondering what you thought when you saw the treatment that he received in the Oval Office on Friday.
I think, first of all, it's important every chance we get to lay out the facts as clearly as possible. In 2014, Russia chose to invade Ukraine, to occupy Crimea and parts of eastern Ukraine. For that, they were kicked out of the G7. And in 2022, they chose to violate the existing ceasefire and invaded Ukraine with the intention of taking Kyiv in 3 days and the entire country in 3 weeks. That has failed. Russia continues to try to fight to claim more land in Ukraine, and we could see an end to this war tomorrow if Russia decided to stop its illegal invasion of Ukraine. On Friday in the Oval Office, President Zelensky pointed out in so many words that Vladimir Putin is a liar and a criminal and cannot be trusted to keep his word in any way, shape, or form, because he has demonstrated time and time again that he will break any agreements. I stand with Vladimir Zelensky, and I stand with the people of Ukraine.
Okay.
C'est important de se rappeler des faits.
That last line, by the way, man who can't be trusted, whose word doesn't mean anything, can't sign a deal with.
It's a direct shot at Trump.
He's talking about Putin, but we know who else he's talking about there.
Yeah, I can't honor a deal he signed. It's like, this is the worst. Who's the idiot who signed this deal? That would have been you. You signed it. You brokered it. You negotiated. You signed it.
You're the idiot. Don't you remember you hate Chrystia Freeland because of it? You get hives at the mention of her name because of it. You really don't remember? That was you? Yeah. You will see the Prime Minister here, where it is that the president appeared to be wrong on who is responsible for the war and who started it and whatnot. The Prime Minister seems to be very clear about who that is and is not afraid to say it. Now, you will notice in this answer, when the Prime Minister talked about what happened at the Oval Office on Friday, he talked about what President Zelensky said, what President Zelensky did, but did not mention anything about the other side, which prompted him to be asked, does the specter of impending tariffs stop you from saying all you wish to say? Which he answered. And then someone asked again in the same way, why are you avoiding criticizing him? And the Prime Minister answered that again, very, very diplomatically. So, Mr. Grizzly, if we go to 1110, this is the question in French was the specter of tariffs stopping you from saying what you wanted to say was asked in French. So he answered in French. This is his answer in English to the same question.
This past week, we've had a number of ministers and heads of agencies, including the CBSA and the RCMP, in Washington to share the concrete measures that we've moved forward with on the border, whether it's the $1.3 billion that have led to new helicopters, drones, 10,000 personnel now across our borders. These are measures that have seen significant reductions in even the small amount of fentanyl that was passing across our borders. This is work that we are doing, as we always have, with the United States to ensure the safety of our border from illegal flows in both directions. The facts establish very clearly that Canada is not an issue in terms of source of illegal fentanyl into the United States. We had about less than 1% when we first started talking about this many months ago. That number is significantly lower than that, even now. But we all know the American administration will make its own choices in terms of tariffs. We will continue to work to ensure, to do everything we can to make sure that there are no tariffs on Tuesday. But if ever there were tariffs on Tuesday, as we have all seen, as we were ready to do last time, we will have a strong, unequivocal, and proportional response as Canadians expect.
All right. You will notice here that the Prime Minister says, but this current American administration is bonkers. But the Americans, they will make their own decisions, and we will. So, does the specter of impending tariffs stop you from saying what you wish to say? Answers about what he's doing to address the main concern for the additional tariffs, and then say, but the United States will do what the United States will do. So, in other words, yes. Right? Clearly, if you're saying the United States will, the United States will do what it will do, because clearly, we all know he's not saying what he really feels.
Obviously.
Obviously. So then there are more questions about 2% of spending on NATO and allyship with NATO, and basically a general closing question about whether or not the president and particularly the vice president should maybe visit Ukraine, because the vice president said, "I know what's going on there. I saw it on TV." Yeah. And of course, the Prime Minister very diplomatically said that, well, there's nothing like seeing it for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Of course. Now, the reason I'm not showing these answers is because I'm going to show you the clip of what he said at that conference in Europe. A lot of the NATO stuff is contained in this answer here. And this answer also, remember it, because it's going to compare and contrast a little bit with what Pierre says that he's willing to do, or how he represents what it is that we have done.
At what's the starting point?
Oh, right from the start.
At 12:45.
Oh, sorry. No, no, Miss Grizzly. Sorry. Maybe it hasn't gotten to you yet. Yeah. Hold on. Let me check to see if it got to you. It got stuck in the inbox. No, there should be one more something that came in at around 7:42 for you.
Don't have anything.
Okay, I'll send it again. All right. There we go. Should probably just arrive now.
Got it.
All right. Really weird. So this one didn't say that the previous one got stuck in my outbox, but that's okay. No problem. So yeah, this is the Prime Minister literally around the table. You'll be able to tell, obviously, by the microphone and the flags behind there. And he's making it very clear.
When was this address?
I'm going to guess that this was this weekend at the meeting itself, the summit with all the European leaders, and this was around the table.
Okay. Oh, he looks younger in this video. Maybe it's the lighting.
That could be. Yeah, maybe it's from another time. There's no date on it.
First of all, Canada has been there for Ukraine from day one, indeed from before day one, as in 2015 we started training Ukrainian military forces on the ground in Ukraine, which was a significant part. Western training to the Ukrainian armed forces is one of the reasons why Ukraine has been able to stand up to the Russian invaders so effectively over the past years. It's not just Canada, a number of countries have been involved. But for historical reasons, Canada having the second largest diaspora of Ukrainians in the world means that we felt deeply connected to Ukraine. But we also believe deeply that it's not just about Ukraine. It's about the rules and the values and the principles of sovereignty, of independence, of territorial integrity that protects every country in the world. All of us rely on those rules to be able to build peace and security. And we know that with the world changing, we're all going to have to do more around peace and security. One of the key themes that we heard today, as we've heard from many, many partners around the world in NATO and elsewhere over the past number of years, is people are going to be doing more on defense. 9.5 years ago, when I took office in Canada, the previous government had us down below 1% of defense spending, even though the NATO 2% pledge had been made a year or two before. In the subsequent time, we have more than tripled defense spending on the path to 2030, and we're on our way to 2%. And we know we're going to have to continue to do more and more in an uncertain world, and Canada will be there. As to how we will be there, we will work with our neighbors on it, but everything is on the table because we need to make sure that might no longer makes right in this world. That's what has led to 80 years of incredible stability and prosperity, not just in Europe, but around the world, because of the institutions we built out of the ashes of World War II. And standing up for those institutions is in the best interest of every single one of us. Now, as a collection of different nations, we will have different perspectives from time to time on the best way forward, and those will be worked out in forums like this or at the G7 forum or elsewhere. But we are united in our values. We are united in wanting to see peace and fairness and prosperity for all our citizens, and that's what continues to drive us forward. Le Canada va toujours être là pour l'Ukraine. On est là depuis les débuts. On va continuer de l'être et on regardera comment on peut mieux aider dans les années à venir. Parce que défendre l'Ukraine, c'est pas juste défendre l'Ukraine, c'est défendre les principes et les valeurs qui nous protègent tous.
Merci à vous.
So there at the end, the Prime Minister's just basically, repeating that Canada will always be there to defend Ukraine because the values that Ukraine is defending are values that matter to all of us. That's what we need to hear. But that's what our leaders should be doing, not what we're seeing in the United States. So we have a compare and contrast between Canada and the United States. Now, we're going to have a compare and contrast now, if you remember everything that the Prime Minister just said in these answers, with the person that wants his job, has to say. And I can assure you that it is nowhere near as impressive.
Well, of course not.
Yes. So yesterday, as we mentioned, in light of all this news, Ukraine, and particularly, most importantly, the flop in the polls, the leader of the opposition decided he was going to hold a press event. I'm not sure how far in advance it was scheduled, but 10:30 yesterday morning, he came out and decided he was going to say some stuff and to talk at us. We are not going to show the whole thing as we normally do, because, to be totally honest, I don't want to go as far as saying it was pointless. I mean, it was pointless in the sense that what it contributes of value to the Canadian political discourse is pointless. But clearly, he had a point in doing this. How successful he is in achieving it is a whole other question.
Look, I don't know why I did that.
So,
Okay, there we go.
So if we can go to 1344, Mr. Grizzly, on the time thing. This is an important part because this is part of his message that he is modulating to sort of fit with Canada First. Now, I have to say that this is somewhat of a risk for him because we know how much of his base is MAGA. So the reality with Pierre is that he cannot go as full-throated as he should if he's fearing losing his base or if he fears his base, which he does. So he is constrained about that. That is a political reality. For those of us on our side of the political spectrum, we don't care that he's constrained or might lose his base. You need to do and say the right thing.
Immediately on Tuesday, we're faced with yet another possible threat of tariffs. Mr. Trump, the President of the United States, has threatened that tariffs will kick in on Tuesday. We don't know if he's going to pull back again, but if the tariffs do happen, we must retaliate, and we must use the revenues mostly, almost exclusively, to cut taxes for Canadian workers and businesses to bolster our economy against those tariffs. Regardless of what the President does, though, we can't rely on him, and we can't rely on the Americans anymore. We've learned our lesson from 10 years of helplessness. We need to take back control of our economy and bring home a strong, self-reliant, and sovereign nation. Simply put, we need to bring it home.
Okay.
We must bring home our jobs, our resources, our production, our supply chains. We must not only harvest.
So, at least he's able to say we can't rely on them anymore. But then bring it home, and then he goes, we need to, and it's all the stuff that he said before. Then he goes into a laundry list kitchen sink thing, repealing C-69, doing this, doing that, we need to, all these things we need to do, which are all the things he said before that we needed to do before this happened, right? So nothing new there other than him actually saying out loud that we can't trust the Americans anymore. Then we go to 1720, Mr. Grizzly. And this is the real reason that we are gathered here today, well, gathered here yesterday, to hear Pierre talk at us.
Speaking of pushing money out of Canada, we know that is exactly what Mark Carney did when he backed down to Donald Trump. On October 26, 2024, Donald Trump threatened tariffs against Canada to take our jobs. 6 days later, Mark Carney announced that Brookfield headquarters would move from Canada to Trump's hometown of New York City, giving Canadian jobs to Americans. And we all know, no matter what the corporate bigwigs tell you, that when the headquarters goes, the jobs and the money will follow soon after. Mark Carney did exactly what Trump wanted. He backed down and sold out our country when Canada was under attack. He did it while he was acting as Justin Trudeau's economic advisor. When asked why he moved the headquarters out of Canada, he said he had nothing to do with it, that the decision was made after he left the company in January. Yet documents show that the decision was made in October of last year at a meeting that he chaired, where the decision was unanimous, meaning he agreed with it. And then he recommended it in writing to his shareholders. Confronted about his falsehood, he now says he should have been more precise. But here's the thing. He was very precise. He said, and I quote, "The decision, the formal decision of the board, happened after I ceased to be on the board." Again, the decision, the formal decision of the board, happened after I ceased to be on the board. That is a very precise statement, precisely the opposite of the truth. The formal decision happened in October, 3 months before Mark Carney left, and he chaired the meeting. Now, he told this to all of you, the media here today. Let's digest that for a second. He sat at that mahogany table, grasping the gavel, and recorded the decision, which he agreed with, to move the headquarters to New York from Canada. And then just the other night, when you asked him about it, he looked all of you in the eye, and he said the board made the decision after he left the company, and he had nothing to do with it. Are you ever going to believe anything he tells you again? Don't you think he should come before you and explain himself? Mark Carney has to come before Canadians and explain. He needs to explain why he lied and why he sold out our country, why he failed to put Canada first when we were under attack. He needs to apologize to Canadians, not only for lying, but for putting his personal profits ahead of our country. Mark Carney put himself first instead of putting Canada first. We need action.
I got to stop this guy. I can't take much more of his voice right now. He's driving me up the fucking wall.
Okay.
This line of bullshit he's spewing, leaving out specific facts intentionally to paint a narrative that he wants you to hear.
Yes.
This coming from a guy who says the solution to job loss because of tariffs will be to cut taxes. I'm sorry. I don't have a job. How is a tax cut going to help me if I have no freaking income? This man is not very smart at all, is he?
He's not at all, at the least. Like, in the least. Where are we on the timestamp, Mr. Grizzly?
20 minutes and 41 seconds.
Okay, let's go for a couple of extra seconds here to 21:02.
To protect our country and its people, to take back control of our economic future, and to protect Canadians from greedy corporate executives who would ship our jobs abroad. and to bring home the promise of Canada. We have a common sense plan to do it. Conservatives will axe taxes. We will build homes, fix the budget, and stop the crime. We will cut bureaucracy, consultants, corporate welfare, and foreign aid to bring down liberal deficits, taxes, and inflation. We will repeal anti-development laws like C-69 and rapidly greenlight mines, pipelines, factories.
So mines, factories, greenlight. So all the stuff that he's saying before, just trying to fit it into this package now, right? Because he's still committed to his bid. Now, in the first answer that we showed you, he mentioned something about like our dependence on the United States, right? Because remember, Pierre Poilievre wants you to believe that our deeply interwoven economy with the United States and our dependence on the United States is a creation of the last 10 years. Of course, any of you who were alive during the free trade election between Mulroney and Turner knows that our deeper integration and reliance with the United States is not just a Trudeau phenomenon.
No. The
Right?
free trade agreement was brought under the Mulroney government.
Yes. And we already had...
What party was he with again? The Progressive Conservative Party.
And didn't we have an auto pact before we had free trade?
Long before. The auto pact goes back to the 50s, if memory serves.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is not new, but he wants to frame this like, because apparently under the Conservatives, they were the great diversifiers of our economy under the Harper years. Okay. Sure, Jan. In this one, we got the real reason, right? Carney, Brookfield, all that type of stuff. Now, you have to understand the play that's going on here, right? He is sitting in front of a mic. Canada's most prolific liar, saying, I am telling you that Mark Carney lied to you once. How can you believe anything he says henceforth? Honey, girlfriend, if we are going to make this a character test about lying, mendacity, being parsimonious with the truth, committing sins of omission, you are going to lose this race. And you are doing this in the context where you are talking about this Brookfield thing and omitting a lot of very important things from the story. Now, as a public relations advisor, Mark Carney did not do himself any favors by answering that question the way he did. But let's bring a couple of facts here. This is from the Globe and Mail, right? And Mark Carney, first of all, joined Brookfield's board in 2020 and became chair in 2022. He stepped down in mid-January when he launched his bid for the Liberal leadership. Okay, so it's not like he joined Brookfield in 2020. It's not like he had been there like 20, 30, 40 years.
Right.
Okay. That's the first thing. Now here, Liberal leadership candidate Mark Carney says he should have been more precise when he said he was no longer chair of a major investment company when the formal decision was made to move its headquarters to the United States, despite records showing the relocation was completed during his tenure. Mark Carney's comments about his relationship with Brookfield Asset Management came under scrutiny after this week's Liberal leadership debate when he was asked whether he supported the company's decision to relocate its headquarters from Toronto to New York last year. Mr. Carney did not seem to say yes or no. He seemed to say that he didn't have much to do with the decision. Records show that he actually did support the move. Okay, when he was chair. Mr. Carney was also unclear Friday when asked if he would proactively disclose any potential financial conflicts of interest, saying only he will follow all ethics and conflict of interest rules if he becomes prime minister. He added that he has now received his security clearance, unlike Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre, and that he has initiated the process of renouncing his citizenship in the United Kingdom and in Ireland. Now, these two things are important because actually he revealed during the debates that he had already started the process to get his security clearance. It seems that he has had it. Now, Mr. Carney would not have any trouble getting that security clearance because as governor of the former governor of the Bank of Canada and former governor of the Bank of England, he certainly had to do a lot of security clearance stuff in order to be able to have those positions, and not much has changed in his life or his personal life since. So I'm sure his obtaining his security clearance was a little faster than it would have been for Elizabeth May and whatnot, who never had a very, very high level security clearance when she applied for hers, or Mr. Singh, as opposed to him, who probably had a pretty high one as governor of Bank of Canada, governor of Bank of England at some point. So he already has his, and unlike Andrew Scheer, and this is something that a lot of people have been talking about. Oh, Mark Carney has 3 passports, so therefore he cannot be trusted. But it's like, if you're a dual citizen who happens to have a job over which you have a diplomatic passport, you've got 3 passports. It's actually rather common, actually. But Mark Carney here is in the process of renouncing his citizenships in the UK, United Kingdom, and Ireland. I would suspect that those were citizenships that he maybe had to apply for in order to be able to have the job as the governor of Bank of England.
Yes.
Maybe that job is reserved for citizens only. But he's renouncing them, unlike a recent former leader of the Conservative Party of Canada who had dual citizenship the entire time he was an MP and a party leader, and openly criticized Stéphane Dion and Michaël Jean, leader of the Liberal Party and Governor General respectively, for holding their positions while having dual citizenship. So it's not that the Conservatives have a problem with a party leader holding dual citizenship while they're the party leader. I guess they just have a problem with that information being publicly known while it's happening. Don't come and tell me you found religion on dual citizenship and being a party leader now, Conservatives. Andrew Scheer is still a member of the party, and that I remember he kind of Larry Craig'd his thing. I intend to renounce my citizenship, but since he never became prime minister, he never really did it. So as far as I know, Yankee Doodle Andy still has both citizenships, whereas Carney is in the process of renouncing his, and Carney now has a security clearance, and you guys won't. So again, if we are going to make this a character test about honesty, Mr. Poilievre, it's your turn to apply for your security clearance. Let's see if you can obtain it. Or let's see if you will say something on that form that will require further scrutiny. Because it may not be completely true.
His whole raison d'etre for not getting it is so, don't know if it's Trudeau can just classify anything and then I can't talk about it. So what if you become the next prime minister? Then what? You get the clearance automatically, but you still can't talk about it.
Yeah, it doesn't change. What you can't talk about is not decided by the prime minister.
No, it's not. It is not decided by the prime minister.
Yeah.
The prime minister is given a briefing that says top secret, eyes only. Yes. He doesn't make it top secret. No prime minister does. It's not how it works.
Exactly. That would be silly to put that power. Do you want any prime minister to have that power? That's just silly. Speaking to the Globe and Mail at a leadership event in Oakville, Ontario, where he appeared with Transport Minister Anita Anand, who, by the way, has reversed her decision and said that she will run again in the next election, now that she pretty much thinks it's going to be Carney. It's like, Carney, Anand, long live, hey, technocrats of the world unite. I wouldn't have any problem by being led by very obviously smart people for a while. People who are good at their jobs. Thank you, thank you, Anita Anand, for staying in the game. It's not like you're not needed. So thanks. The Liberal front-runner tried to explain the apparent discrepancy in his remarks about Brookfield. He said that there were, quote, several elements to the transaction and that the agreement was complicated. Quote, I should have been more precise in my answer, Mr. Carney said. I think the core, though, is what we are actually talking about. We're talking about the technical change to where the head office is, no difference to any employment. He said the move, quote, enhances the liquidity, but is still a great Canadian company. Now, when Mr. Poilievre stands in front of the mic and says, 6 days later, after Trump said, yeah, Trump did this type of thing where he said, you know what, hey, if you want to be listed on the U.S. stock indices now, you need to have a headquarters in the United States. So Brookfield Asset Management, the parent company, or Brookfield, I'm not sure whichever ones, but the parent company took one of this little subsidiaries of Brookfield. Now, you have to remember that Brookfield, the whole group of Brookfield, is one parent company with a whole bunch of little companies. All of them together represent more than 10% of the Toronto Stock Exchange. It's a big company.
Very big company.
It is a Canadian, it's a Canadian success story.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yes.
Like this. So at this moment, now remember what conservatives always say about leaders, right? Corporate leaders, their only duty is to their shareholders. But Pierre's sitting there like this, like Mark Carney, as chair of Brookfield, had some type of duty to Canadians to keep the headquarters of one of the subsidiaries in Canada come what may. Not to go to the United States to comply with American law so that a great Canadian success story could be listed on the U.S. Stock Exchange so that it could continue to grow and become. So apparently in Pierre Poilievre's world now, in the conservative world, is if you are a Canadian business owner and you are successful, and if you list yourself on the U.S. Stock Exchange, and any Canadian businesses who are listed on any U.S. Stock Exchange right now, you are traitors. You have sold out your country. You cannot, you should not aspire as Canadians to be successful enough to list on a U.S. stock exchange, because that will require moving something, creating a subsidiary, moving there, maybe one or two jobs that are running the thing there, but nothing else, because you can't do that. You are not entitled to have that success in the freest, allegedly, country of the world. That's what he's saying.
But, well, it's absurdly sarcastic. That is what he's saying.
I don't know if everybody caught that when he's saying that, but that's what he is saying right now.
It's called reading between the lines, but you listen to what he says, and you can interpret it one way, or you can interpret it the way it's meant to be told. And yeah.
Mm-hmm. The former Bank of Canada has framed his leadership bid around a promise to focus on growing the Canadian economy. He was pressed after the debate earlier this week as to whether that commitment was undercut by the fact he was the chair of the firm that decided to move to the U.S. In response, Mr. Carney said, quote, "The formal decision of the board happened after I ceased to be on the board." Mr. Carney has been accused by the Conservatives of lying when he said he was not chair of Brookfield when the decision was made. Quote, "Sometimes I answer questions that go into details when I should keep it at a higher level. That's part of the problem with not being a politician," Mr. Carney said. Mr. Carney also skirted questions about proactively disclosing his finances beyond what is required by law. He is not currently subject to any federal ethic rules, as he is not an elected MP, nor is he a public office holder. Quote, "I will follow all the ethics rules and conflict of interest rules and all the appropriate rules as Prime Minister from day one," he said. What you're asking effectively is, am I going to do more than others do when Pierre doesn't even do the basics of what he should do as leader, he added, criticizing Mr. Poilièvre for not getting a security clearance. The question should be for Pierre Poilièvre, why won't you do the basics, as opposed to asking me to do something that no one else does? Thank you. Now, again, for clarity, it probably would be better for him to put out that kind of information earlier. There's no doubt, but he's not obligated to in any way, shape, or form. He's not. Under the existing rules, public office holders have up to 60 days after taking office to make a confidential report to the Ethics Commissioner, which must include a description of their direct and contingent liabilities, a breakdown of all sources of income over the past 12 months, their charitable work over the past year, and, quote, any other information the Commissioner deems necessary. In addition, there's a 120-day deadline to make a public declaration of assets and outside activities, subject to some exemptions, and sign off a summary statement to be posted on the Commissioner's website. And then I mentioned Mr. Carney joined in 2020 Brookfield. The Globe and Mail first reported in September that the company was thinking about moving its headquarters to the U.S. So all of this is public knowledge, right? Right here, boom, boom, boom. Brookfield Asset Management considers moving head office to U.S. to qualify for stocks indexes. Globe and Mail. I've got the article right in front of me, written by James Bradshaw. So this was reported in September that this was going on, but Pierre is presenting to us like it's some big revelation that we just found out somehow. Yeah. The relocation was technical and designed to give the firm a better access to U.S. stock indices. Quote, as part of this effort, Brookfield Asset Management has now changed its head office to New York. The company then confirmed in an October 31st press release, as well as a November 4 letter to shareholders that also laid out plans to pursue a new share agreement. The Globe repeatedly asked Mr. Carney's campaign on Wednesday for clarification of his comments, considering the public statements from the company about the relocation had been made well before he stepped down. His campaign has pointed to a February 4th press release from Brookfield Asset Management noting the conclusion of the new share arrangement and pointed out Mr. Carney was no longer on the board by then. So when Mr. Carney said he was no longer on the board, he is looking at the February 4th date when everything was completely finalized and the new share agreement was announced, and said, I wasn't there by the time that happened. But yes, clearly it was announced to the public in September and he was there at that point. According to Brookfield's disclosures, the company had already moved its headquarters by that point without needing shareholders' approval. Its corporate parent, Brookfield Corp, still owns 73% of Brookfield Asset Management and is based in Toronto. The relocation does not affect any Canadian operations. So there we go. Brookfield Asset Management is the one that moved to New York in order to be included on the stock exchange. Brookfield Corp owns Brookfield Asset Management, owns 73% of it, and Brookfield Corp is headquartered in Toronto. All of that part, Pierre does not say.
Of course not.
So in a context where he literally has the balls to come up to a mic and suggest that this one guy, because of a lack of precision on one statement, must be a liar, and therefore we cannot trust anything he has to say anymore. Okay, now let's apply that same criteria to the fact that you, Pierre Poilievre, have a lifetime compliance agreement with Elections Canada.
Yeah. When was the last time that was ever issued to a member of Parliament? I don't believe it's ever been done before.
You have a lifetime compliance agreement with Elections Canada because you were caught cheating. And I am guessing, even though I do not know with 100% certainty, that the reason for which you signed the lifetime compliance agreement with Elections Canada is you knew that if this did go to court, you probably had a very, very, very good chance of being found guilty, and you did not want that, so you signed. And you promised to be a very, 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 very good little boy for the rest of your career in politics when it comes to these types of things in order to avoid a trial, which clearly, at least I suspect, you thought that you would lose, hence your signature.
Well,
so if we want to talk about honesty and coming clean, I don't remember you standing before a camera and microphones explaining why it is you felt you needed to sign a lifetime compliance agreement to avoid a trial.
I don't think he would do good in prison. I really don't think he would do good in prison.
If he runs his mouth in prison like he does in real life, he wouldn't do well, that's for sure.
This is what I'm getting at, you know. The guy...
He's a little mouthy. He's a little too mouthy for jail.
Well, he plays fast and loose with the truth because he's a proven known liar. This is not a secret. I'm not telling you anything you've not heard before. We've called out his lies on this program many a time.
You can't even spell his last name without the word lie in it.
We'll continue to call them out. And, you know, the folks who say, well, why don't you ever show the conservative perspective of that? Well, what is the conservative perspective? The guy's a lying piece of shit. So some conservative come in and tell me how you can defend this man. I'd be happy to listen. But you need to come armed with facts and the truth to defend him. No lies, no tales, no gaslighting. Facts and truth. And if you can't defend him with facts and truth, then he's indefensible.
Yep. Now, back in the day when this was being announced, Brookfield Asset Management is considering moving its head office to New York to set it up to join a wider roster of stock indexes as it seeks to expand the pool of potential investors in its stock. The Toronto-based asset management manager floated a series of changes which are still under consideration to investors at a presentation in New York on Tuesday. They would be the company's next steps to broaden its access to capital markets following a 2022 spinoff that listed 25% of its shares in public markets. If Brookfield moves ahead with the plan, it could choose to re-register its asset manager's head office in New York, which is already its largest output around the world, but keep its Canadian incorporation. The company would also undertake a share exchange that would make all of the asset manager's shares publicly traded. Parent entity Brookfield Corp currently owns nearly 3/4 of the asset manager's stock through an unlisted holding company, while the other quarter is publicly traded. Brookfield would swap that stake for public shares in Brookfield Asset Management, keeping its underlying ownership unchanged. That would mean that the market capitalization of Brookfield Asset Management would reflect the full value of the business, about US $70 billion, instead of roughly of 1/4 of that amount currently. Seems to me here that if a corporation's sole duty is to its shareholders, and it would therefore be a fiduciary responsibility to be able to pursue the greatest amount of investment and profit possible, that when there comes an opportunity to list a US $70 billion worth company on a US-based stock index in order to be able to attract that investment, that would be a good thing and a legally required thing, actually. And that had Mr. Carney or the board not done that, they could have been sued by their own shareholders. But then again, leave it to a conservative who is apparently good on the economy to not understand the concept of fiduciary duty.
You're talking way above his head.
Brookfield Asset Management would still be taxed in Canada, and its parent entity, Brookfield Corp, would remain Toronto-based, owning 73% of the asset manager. The company would also keep its Toronto Stock Exchange listing and place in Canadian stock indexes. In that sense, the proposed changes would be largely technical in nature, and Brookfield said in its presentation that there would be no changes to business operations, but Pierre is telling you that this is a complete sellout by greedy corporate executives. Okay. Chief Financial Officer Hadley Pierre Marshall said Tuesday that Brookfield had received feedback from shareholders that urged the company to focus on further increasing the liquidity of its asset manager stock and gaining inclusion in prominent US-based and global stock indexes. The proposed plan would give Brookfield new status with some indexes, such as the Russell 2000 index of smaller capitalization companies, but the company would need to make further changes that are not currently being contemplated to be eligible to join the S&P 500 index of larger capitalization companies, which is tracked by funds worth trillions of dollars. So here's another detail, is that they had the option of going on the Russell 2000 or the S&P 500, but the S&P 500 would require even more concessions, and they decided not to go all the way. Pierre doesn't tell you that part either.
Of course he wouldn't.
They conceded the minimum that they needed in order to be able to be on the index. They could have done more and reached higher, but they chose not to. Moving the company's registered head office to New York, quote, makes sense just because we have the largest percentage of our employees, our revenues, and of asset management located in the US, she said. With all of the asset manager's stock publicly owned, quote, it will reflect the appropriate true value of our market cap at almost $70 billion. With Brookfield's ownership, incorporation, and dividend treatment With Brookfield's ownership, incorporation, and dividend treatment remaining unchanged, quote, this is a non-event for our shareholders, she said. Part of the rationale for Brookfield's decision in 2022 to spin off its asset manager and list 1/4 of its shares publicly was to create a simpler, asset-light company that would be more appealing to investors looking for pure exposure to investments in alternative assets. By gaining eligibility to join more stock indexes, Brookfield could entice a new swath of investors to compare its valuation and performance directly against other large, publicly listed asset managers in the United States. Some Canadian companies have gone much further, such as Ovintiv Incorporated, formerly Encana Corporation. Do you know what Encana does? Kits and Cubs?
Their name rings a bell.
Ovintiv, well, Encana was a Canadian oil and gas company that operated from 2002 to 2020. The company was formed when Pan-Canadian Energy Corporation and Alberta Energy Company Limited merged. In 2019, Encana announced that it would rebrand as Ovintiv Incorporated and move its headquarters from Calgary to Denver. Did Pierre run to a camera and call the leaders of Ovintiv or Encana greedy corporate whatevers who are selling out their country to when they actually moved to Denver, the whole thing? Oh, but it was oil and gas, so that's okay. That's okay. Yes. Brookfield's proposed changes are far less dramatic, but as the asset manager grows rapidly, it manages about US $1 trillion in assets and plans to double that figure to US $2 trillion within 5 years. Its proposed changes demonstrate the powerful allure of the vast pools of capital increasingly flowing to the US and other premier stock indexes around the world. So, these are all elements of truth that the man sitting in front of that mic that we just showed you, wanting to put another man on trial for lack of truth, just conveniently forgot to add to any conversation he's had about Carney and Brookfield since he started raising the subject. Now, Carney is not helping himself here. He isn't.
No, he's not.
But conservatives also don't have a case.
No, but I mean, you are correct. Carney is not helping himself here at all.
Yep.
It's not a good look.
And this is the stuff. This is the stuff that makes me think if the polls are good, March 9th he wins and March 10th he goes, because if he continues to answer questions like this, he is going to create the opportunity sooner rather than later for the conservatives to beat down on him and redefine him. So this is the part that I'm worried about Mark Carney not being a politician and not being the most dynamic speaker. Because if he gets on a one-on-one with Pierre on this, Pierre's going to flatten him on optics. Colbier, when did you do it? What's the date? Just the date, please. Just the date. Tell me. Why does that those dates don't match? Just the date. Just the date. And it is Carney, who's more slow and more deliberate and more like this. In a one-on-one with Pierre, with him like doing the yippee chihuahua thing, he's not going to have a chance to do my first point, my second point, and I would like to finish with my third. That's not going to happen. There's going to be no time for that. All right. So now we get to the questions. If we go back to Pierre's thing at 22:54, and I'm going to show you how he trails off at the end of his sort of statement leading into questions, because when he walked to the podium, again, because he always starts in French, so we didn't show it to you, he looked again like it was one of those nights that he either didn't sleep at all, was forced by Anna to sleep in the bathtub, or hit the bottle really hard.
That's a lot.
I mean, with polling numbers like that, I mean, that would drive me to drink. So I'm just saying, it was one of those three things. But he was not the most energetic and peppy looking. And when his hair is completely greased back and flat, that's sort of like I just woke up and because normally he has a little poof, some styling to it.
Proud flag, Canada. Let's bring it home.
Thank you. We'll now take questions from the floor.
Good morning, Mr. Poilievre. Christy Kirkup with the Globe and Mail. What is your reaction to the exchange in the Oval Office between Donald Trump and Vladimir Zelensky, both in English and in French, please?
We support Ukraine in its right to defend itself and to be independent. The aggressor in this conflict is Russia. Russia carried out an unprovoked invasion of Ukraine, an invasion that it has been mercilessly prosecuting for the last 3 years, and Ukraine has been the victim of that invasion. All democracies need to stand with Ukrainians and their right to defend themselves and reclaim their territory. And any suggestion to the contrary is wrong. I would further add that Canada could have helped defund Putin. We could have approved the Energy East pipeline, which would have sent 1 million barrels of Western Canadian oil to the Atlantic, where it could have been shipped to Europe. We could have approved LNG projects in Quebec and Atlantic Canada, as the Germans, the Ukrainians, the Greeks, and others pleaded with us to do. All of that would have broken dependence on Putin. But Justin Trudeau said there was no business case. He killed the Energy East pipeline, and Mark Carney supported him in killing all those projects. Bill C-69 makes it impossible to send our resources out of North America. So what we need to do is reverse this radical anti-Canadian energy agenda that Carney Trudeau have imposed and rapidly approve projects so that we can sell Canadian energy to displace Russia and turn dollars for dictators into paychecks for our people.
All right.
What?
You can
hang on, wait
them
dollars to dictators?
Russia and turn dollars for dictators into paychecks for our people.
Dollars for dictators, okay.
Yeah. So, he gets it right that Russia's the one that invaded Ukraine and all that kind of stuff. But if that wasn't the most tepid defense of a duty to defend Ukraine in any way, I have yet to hear it with my own ears. And you know how tepid it is because he couldn't keep the answer strictly about what happened in that Oval Office meeting, but pivoted away to we need to do more oil and gas business because, you know, that's the answer to everything. 2652, Mr. Grizzly, again, asked about specifically the coalition of the willing, which appears to be one of the results of the big European meeting, is that there is a coalition of the willing that seems to be getting ready to provide the securities for Ukraine. He's asked about this.
Famously George Bush's speech.
Yes, as well. Yes, those words always make me a little nervous.
Morning, Colton for LCTV. If you can also respond in French and English, that'd be appreciated. Our allies are calling for a coalition of the willing to guarantee the security of Ukraine. You talked about pipelines there, but what tangible military supports would your government provide Ukraine, and does it include Canadian troops on the ground?
Thank you for your question. I haven't seen any such proposal. What I can tell you is that we've already supported, for example, giving missiles. We got a thank you letter from the Ukrainian military for the missiles that James Bazan, my shadow minister of defense, identified, and then the government eventually accepted his suggestion to donate them. We also think that that the best way to provide support is by selling Canadian energy, breaking the Russian monopoly that finances the war. Putin has total dominance on the European energy market because Canada, under Justin Trudeau and the Liberals, has said no. You know, I wonder sometimes, if we had 1 million barrels of Western Canadian oil going to Europe right now, or 3 years ago, if we had thousands of cubic feet every day of natural gas going to Europe from Canada, would Putin have been able to fund a 3-year-long war? I doubt it. But Justin Trudeau and Mark Carney said there was no business case for exporting LNG.
Wait a minute. I doubt it. Do you know how much money Putin has? All of the oligarchs, that's not their money. It's Putin's money. Notice how they keep falling out of windows? This guy's not playing with a full deck.
And oil, both of them have opposed pipelines. They're on the record. Don't be fooled. The last-minute promises they make before elections are not even worth the promises, not even worth the paper they're written on. Only the Conservatives will repeal the Liberal anti-development law and rapidly export Canadian oil and gas and other materials to break dependence on dirty dictators and bring home powerful paychecks for our people.
All right.
Merci.
Bring home powerful paychecks for our people.
I know.
Why did he have to throw that? That doesn't... Oh.
I know. It's just silliness. Okay, so to go through
I'll be right back.
more of Pierre's silliness here. In the these two answers kind of go together, because in his first answer, right, which was an utterly passionless, allegedly pro-Ukraine statement, which drift into making a case for energy east, so much about caring for Ukraine. In this one, the question is, what tangible military supports would your government provide Ukraine? And does that include Canadian troops on the ground? Mentions nothing about Canadian troops on the ground. It goes, I haven't seen such a proposal. The question was about what you would propose if you were the government. So clearly, nothing. So much for caring about Ukraine, because it seems to me that this is something that you might have thought about as part of your foreign policy if you were to become prime minister one day. But you turn around, you go, I haven't seen such. Nobody asked you to react to a proposal to provide military supports to Ukraine. They asked what your government would do. Your answer clearly was nothing. And once again, you went back to pivoting to selling more oil and gas. That tax cut and perhaps cutting some red tape will surely solve the world's problems. Blaming Carney, Trudeau for all these pipelines being canceled, saying Trudeau canceled all these types of things. But that is not necessarily true. That's not necessarily true. And we know that Energy East was not canceled. Like, a lot of these projects weren't canceled by the government. A lot of these projects were the companies pulled out.
Yeah. There's been,
in fact, the federal government bought a pipeline from
Correct.
a company that pulled out. And while Pierre keeps on saying that Bill C-69 means we will not be able to export anything else, aren't there 2 LNG terminals being built right now?
Yes, there are. Yeah.
Which means once they're built, and ready to ship, that would probably be after C-69 passes. So it seems a little silly that we would be building LNG export terminals if there's a bill that's about to be passed that say that we can't export our resources. If that were actually true. So I'm going to guess it's not. Yeah. Okay. Let's keep going to this one here. 3243. Once again, the question is, what would you do? Just like this one, what policies would your government support troops to Ukraine or military supports? This one is, what would you do to avoid a 6th conflict on softwood lumber? Now, he's already talked about lumber a couple of times before in this press conference, so just wanted you to know that the lumber sexual is still alive and well.
Well, there's rumors floating around town right now, and I don't know if there's any truth to them, but there are rumors floating around town that they're looking to replace him because, I mean, he blew a 30-point lead, a 40-point
Timber!
lead? Blew a 30 or 40-point lead. I can't remember what the number was. He blew a
27
massive
at the
lead.
most.
27-point lead. Okay, 27-point lead. He blew that simply by doing nothing but yelling about Trudeau, and then Trudeau decided to resign, and that lead disappeared because people aren't tired of the Liberal Party policies. They're just leader fatigue. Again, fueled by social media and right-wing American-owned hedge funds that own most of the publications in this country that they've been saying crap for years. Most of the crap is just that crap with no credibility or shred of the truth to it. But because he's blown that lead, simply by continuing to blame the prime minister who is resigning soon, people are like, no, people were not sick of the government in power. They were just, it was leader fatigue.
And Operation Keep Pierre Talking appears to have worked.
Oh boy, is it ever.
All right, 3243.
Yes.
What would you?
Thank you. Let's not forget, the question was, what are we going to do to avoid or address a future softwood lumber crisis. It's not a future crisis. It's a present and past crisis. These tariffs have now been in place now for 9 years. After Stephen Harper succeeded within 80 days of becoming Prime Minister in convincing George W. Bush to eliminate the softwood lumber tariffs and reimburse $4 billion of wrongfully collected tariffs, the tariffs went right back in under Trudeau. And for 9 years, the Liberals have failed to have them lifted. Not only that, but Joe Biden doubled the softwood tariffs on Canada. All of this before Trump. So the Liberals then went on to sign a trade agreement with Trump that allowed the tariffs to stay in place. That's one of the reasons we're in such a terrible mess. I will fight for an end to these softwood tariffs, and I would activate American home builders and young families looking to buy homes and say to them, look, you're paying more because of this tariff tax on building materials. So if you want more affordable homes, call your congressman and your senator and tell them to get the president to drop these ridiculous tariffs. Finally, why not build some homes in Canada? There's nothing Donald Trump can do to stop us from building homes in Canada.
Wasn't he the guy who said he was housing minister and he built exactly how many homes when he... No, 6. There were 6 built.
6, sorry.
There were 6 homes built while he was overseeing a portfolio that involved housing. He was never housing minister.
Yes. But of several portfolios he was managing at the time.
Yes. We'll continue.
That is a homegrown business. Pun intended. So we take the GST off new homes. We incentivize municipalities and provinces to take their taxes off. Let's build hundreds of thousands of new affordable homes for our young families using Canadian softwood lumber.
Thank you.
Okay.
You do realize that if the tariffs go on softwood, if they go way up 25%, as Trump says, that will decimate home building across the United States.
Yes.
Right across the country. It will decimate it.
So this contained so many damn lies that when I wrote a thread about this, I actually had to take a 4-tweet aside in order to address this. Now, the only reason I know this is because I followed this issue like a hawk, because one of the things that really bothers me, and has always bothered me, is when I was in history class and I learned about several border disputes that we had with the United States somewhere along the way, and they kept on saying, you know, that border, like it's like when you go into Manitoba, it's like it's not a straight line around that 49th. There's a little part that goes up into Manitoba. What was that about? Oh, that was a trade dispute, and the United States won. Where the border line between Canada and the United States is in around the Strait of Juan de Fuca. Yes. Where that is placed has something to do with fishing stocks, and the decision was made to benefit the United States over and over and over again. So that always put a little bug in my ears, like, why does the United States always win when they go against us? And softwood lumber was one of those things, because when I was old enough to remember, softwood lumber was like a several decade battle that had been going on, and we had kept on going to tribunals, and we would win. And then the United States would appeal, and then we'd go to a tribunal and we'd win, and the United States would appeal, and we'd go to a tribunal and we would win, and it was this song and dance forever. And we got to about 2006, and we were at the final tribunal. There was no other appeals after this final, and we've won everything all the way through, and we prevailed. And what did Stephen Harper, who was Prime Minister at the time, do? Because Pierre is saying that Trudeau screwed it all up. And a resolution was what former Prime Minister Stephen Harper secured back in 2006 when he brought lumber 4 to an end by signing the Softwood Lumber Agreement. The deal amounted to a complex mix of quotas and export taxes, all designed, according to Global Affairs Canada, to promote, quote, a stable and predictable trade environment. If that doesn't sound much like the true spirit of free trade, that's because it was the furthest thing from free trade. It was carefully managed trade. In other words, Stephen Harper, instead of waiting for the verdict of the tribunal that would have said, we won, and it would be over forever for good, at the very last moment, signed a new agreement where he agreed that quotas and export taxes would be imposed on our lumber. He agreed to them. That's what he did in 2006. It wasn't, that was 9 years before Justin Trudeau. It was one of the first frickin' things he did. Because if you remember when Stephen Harper became prime minister, remember David Emerson was a minister in the Liberal government, and then he ran as a Liberal and won his seat and then crossed the floor to the Conservatives to become a minister in their government so he could see the softwood lumber betrayal through to the end. That led to the 2006 stuff.
Right.
If you remember that. The second reason the dispute lumbers on and on, he says, is because its history proves protectionism works, even though Ottawa has repeatedly prevailed over Washington in its key softwood case brought to the World Trade Organization and NAFTA dispute panels. Those victories haven't stopped the U.S. wood business from harassing its Canadian competitors. Typically, the cycle of legal and regulatory wrangling takes an agonizing 5 years to run its course. Nelson says from the time the American lumber lobby files a formal complaint, facing such lengthy, costly litigation, he says it makes economic sense to try and find some kind of resolution. So every time they would make a complaint, it was a 5-year process for that complaint. And then they would make another one and another one. Another one, and it just kept going. This is from Maclean's way back when, during that time. All right, so that's what was going on then. Then Harper got Parliament to approve this new softwood deal by making it a confidence motion. And that's how he ended up getting the support of the bloc that was not ready for an election at that time. That's how he got this bad idea passed.
Right.
On September 7th, Bloc Québécois leader Gilles Duceppe endorsed the softwood lumber deal, effectively neutralizing any chance of an election coming out of a non-confidence vote. 5 days later, Canadian International Trade Minister David Emerson, along with U.S. counterpart Susan Schwab, officially signed the deal in Ottawa. Despite supporters' claims that it was the best deal possible, Elliot Feldman, an international and economic law specialist from the firm Baker and Hostetler in Washington, D.C., and a former director of the Canadian American Business Council, criticized the deal as, quote, one-sided and a bad deal for Canada. On September 19th, 2006, the deal passed its first reading in the Canadian House of Commons with a 172 to 116 majority. On September 27th, the Canadian Press reported that Canada did not meet an October 1st deadline imposed by itself to implement the agreement. Withdrawal of some of the 30 issues regarding the deal was the main reason for the delay on complying to the deal. So, under Harper, we signed it away, threatened a confidence motion to get the support of the bloc to pass a bad deal. Then, on September 27th, so this is September 7th, then 20 days later, the Harper government chose to not meet an October 1st deadline that the Harper government imposed itself to implement the agreement. So you sign an agreement, then you refuse to implement it. Gee, that is going to upset some people that signed the agreement on the other side. Mm-hmm. On March 30th, 2007, the United States requested formal consultations with Canada to resolve concerns regarding Canada's lack of implementation of the export measures. The following month, on April 19th, formal consultations took place between the two governments. On August 7th, the United States, pursuant to a settlement mechanism established in the 2006 Softwood Lumber Agreement, initiated arbitration in the London Court of International Arbitration, a private body. Prime Minister Harper agreed to a private body as a dispute resolution mechanism for softwood lumber. He signed the deal in September 2006. In August 2007, less than a year later, the United States had filed a new grievance, thus starting the multi-decades-long process all over again from square one. The thing that we were going to resolve with finality just a year before Harper caved at the last second and said, hey, let's sign a new agreement that you can claim we violated and keep this going for another 30 years. Instead of just waiting a couple of days for the final ultimate victory. And Pierre Poilievre is going to stand on that stage, and pretend to you that Trudeau screwed off softwood lumber. My God. The official request for arbitration took place on August 13th. Canada responded to this request for arbitration on September 12th. The next year, on January 18th, the U.S. government filed a second arbitration request because that's what the United States does. They just keep filing them.
Mm-hmm.
This one focused on the provincial implementation programs of Ontario and Quebec. Canada responded on February 18th, 2008. On March 4th, the LCIA, that's the private body, ruled in the first arbitration that Canada was indeed in violation of the 2006 Softwood Lumber Agreement. So we signed it and immediately proceeded to violate it in such a way that a private board that we said we would subject ourselves to decided that we violated to their justify starting another 2 decades long process of unending grievances. The panel had been made up of a Belgian arbitrator nominated by Canada, a British arbitrator named by the United States, and a panel president from Germany. On February 26, 2009, that private board announced its ruling in the second arbitration case. Canada was in breach of the Softwood Lumber Agreement as a result of its failure to properly calculate quotas from January to June in 2007. Apparently, we could not do math. Whether that was accidental or accidentally on purpose, we'll never know. The arbitration body ordered that sawmills in the provinces of Ontario and Quebec be closed. So we got royally fucked by Harper on softwood lumber.
Yeah.
Just to make it clear. So when Pierre's going like this, if it wasn't for Trudeau, we'd be better. Like we'd have all the softwood lumber to build our homes. Like, no. I guess. And using more Canadian softwood lumber to build our homes, I am sorry, is not a question to what would you do as Prime Minister to ensure we did not have a sixth battle on softwood lumber. Utter bullshit is his answer. The next question is at 3430, Mr. Grizzly, and he is asked what he would do because he previously, when he's talking about AI and the data centers and whatnot like this, we've got cold climate, so that'll help us with the batteries because batteries heat up and they work better in a cold climate. These whole battery storage centers type of thing, and and we're an energy superpower, so it takes a lot of energy to run these data things. So because we have cold weather and we have energy, we have these advantages. So he is being asked, how would he leverage these advantages to pursue AI data centers in the context of tariffs coming from the United States? And the brilliant economist's answer is,
good morning, Laura Osmond with The Logic. If you could please respond in English and in French. In your Canada First speech at your rally, you spoke about leveraging Canadian energy and our cold climate to power AI data centers in the context of the tariff threat. How specifically would you leverage those Canadian advantages in the context of a trade dispute with the United States?
Well, the Americans need data, and data takes energy. These data centers are they're energy eating beasts. As I said in my speech, an inquiry to an AI chatbot takes 10 times as much electricity as a Google search.
Interesting
Meta,
fact.
Microsoft, Google, and other tech giants are all buying or building nuclear power stations so that they can power their data centers. The Americans cannot keep up with their own demand. We, on the other hand, have a surplus of electricity, and a surplus that we could massively expand if we were to repeal the anti-development laws. We could build natural gas power plants in Alberta. We could get the politics out of the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission to speed up safe construction of both CANDU reactors and small modular reactors. We could produce even more hydroelectricity, and we could be paid hundreds of billions of dollars for that energy to power data centers. And let's make this the place to build them. If we have fast permits and clear rules, then the data centers can be built here, and that would give us more power. Imagine if the new gold, if the gold of the coming century is data, and we have it on our soil, then we're the ones with the control. That's what I mean when I say, let's bring it home.
En français.
Okay.
En français. En français.
The question wasn't, what do you mean when you say bring it home? The question is, how would you leverage the fact that we have a lot of energy and the fact that our climate is cold to construct these AI data centers in the context of U.S. tariffs? There was no how.
No, of course not.
In that answer. He mansplained that data centers require lots of energy and we have a lot of it. He didn't get into anything about the cold. A couple of interesting factoids about how much energy is required to process. But how would you leverage that in the context of tariffs? I'm guessing that the answer is that he's not. Because you'd think about all that he's talked about, that he would have a few thoughts about that to share on how, but nope. He's got nothing but a variation on cut red tape, which is, of course, cutting citizen protections.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. Then he's asked the question that kills about the dip in the polls. And the question basically comes down to, why are Canadians turning away from you? As you can get, and Pierre provided a direct answer to a direct question. Now, that most definitely did not happen. Mr. Grizzly.
Just a second.
36, sorry. Yeah. This is some skating.
Okay, let's have a look.
In English and French, Mr. Poilievre, we are likely weeks away from an election call, and most polls show that once massive conservative lead has withered, and the party now appears to be in a tie with the Liberals. This has come despite a near steady barrage of conservative attacks against a Liberal frontrunner, presumptive Liberal frontrunner Mark Carney, and also in the context of this Trump tariff threat, where Donald Trump has taken some constant shots at Canadian political leaders, including recently lashing out at you. Why do you think voters have appeared to be turning away from your party at this time?
Well, on Mr. Trump's comments, it is the president says that I am not MAGA, and that's true. I'm Canada first. Canada will never be the 51st state. I will always put my country ahead of all others. Now, I have no doubt that the president would love to have Mark Carney as Canada's prime minister. Why wouldn't he? Mark Carney did exactly what Mr. Trump asked for. He moved his company headquarters to Trump's hometown 6 days after the president threatened tariffs on our country.
That was, Jesus Christ. This guy is so creative with the truth.
Mm-hmm.
Carney supported carbon taxes on Canada, supported blocking pipelines in Canada while he invested in American coal. Carney's policies, which Trudeau implemented, pushed $500 billion investment dollars out of Canada to the U.S., exactly as Trump wanted. So Trump would love to have a weak prime minister like Mark Carney, who will sell out our country and drive jobs and money abroad. He probably doesn't want a strong leader like me, who will axe taxes, greenlight big projects, make this the best place in the world to do business, and bring home the hundreds of billions of dollars of investment that Carney-Trudeau Liberals have driven south.
En français.
Okay. I will give you time to stop laughing, and we'll get up off the floor and wipe the tears of
I can't with this guy.
I'm laughing so hard.
Why are none of the reporters pushing back on this, though?
I know. I
none of them
don't
push back. Like literally, it's like, excuse me, that's none. What you just described did not happen that way, sir. You are being dishonest. That is not how things took place.
I know. I guess, and then the last question is again him just saying, like, Trump loves liberals. Okay. On this one, this is the second purpose of this press conference, right? Is to try out a new line. Because, Trump came out the other day and said, I don't know if I much like Pierre Poilievre. I know I don't like that Chrystia Freeland woman. She's whack. But I don't know. Pierre doesn't strike me as a particular MAGA guy. Of course, while Trump is trying to claim that, Trudeau fired Chrystia Freeland because of Trump, because everything happens because of Trump, apparently.
The sun doesn't rise in the morning until he decides to get up. You didn't know that?
Yes, indeed. So you got Freeland going, there's a reason Trump called me a whack. There's a reason he complained about my negotiating skills. There's a reason Putin kicked me out of Russia too, she wrote. I don't back down. And Trump and Putin know it. That's actually true here. But yes, Trump said that the conservative leader, Pierre Poilievre's, quote, biggest problem is that he's not a MAGA guy. Trump also complained that Pierre is not positive about me. I don't know. I mean, I can't tell you, Pierre. I just don't know. I don't like what he's saying about me. It's just not positive about me. And we've done a great job, Trump said. And then Pierre made a big deal of saying this online too. Mr. President, it's true. I'm not MAGA. I am for Canada first, always. Canada has always been America's best friend and ally, but we will never be the 51st state, which is literally, again, the minimum you can say. At least he's saying directly to the president now, 5 weeks later or something. Yeah. But he's finally getting around. It's like, my God, Newfoundland arrives earlier than he does. Half an hour later in Newfoundland. So this guy is trying to make us believe that Canada First is somehow materially different in any way, shape, or form from MAGA.
It's not.
And Bernier giggled his ass off.
Oh, I'm sure.
So this is the new song and dance, right? I'm not MAGA. I'm Canada First. I'm wondering how many people he lost saying that. But it's like, girl, get the fuck out of here with that bullshit. You walk, talk, and smell like MAGA. To paraphrase Shakespeare, a MAGA by any other name would smell just as un-Canadian. You could call it Canada First. You could call it Canada Always. You could call it, no, look at me. I'm really not like, dude. He says he doesn't recognize two genders. You say you're not aware of more than two. He talks about cutting foreign aid. You talk about building a military base and funding it with foreign aid. Days later, sometimes on the same very day. Like, come on, man. You're not MAGA. You are MAGA.
Yeah,
you are MAGA. You are MAGA. Canada First is just another word for MAGA. It's just, come on, dude. But apparently this is the new song and dance now. Yes. So, and in that last little bit that we're not going to show, he claims that he will be better at anything meaningful than Carney would be. That he who fears his own base is strong and Carney is weak, and Trump loves liberals because they're so weak, because liberals give Trump what he wants, which is the reason why he hates Chrystia Freeland so much, because the liberals gave Trump what he wanted.
Yeah,
and why he wanted Trudeau gone so bad, because the liberals gave Trump what he wanted when he was there last time.
So there's this long-standing fallacy that the Conservatives are good fiscal managers. Number one, we know that's not true. It's proven that it's not true.
It's not. They have not proven it once in the last 100 years.
No. And another long-standing fallacy that they stand up for Canadian military and military personnel, which is not true at all. They have cut.
Mm-hmm.
Now, with the exception of Jean Chrétien in the EH 101, it's always been the Liberal Party that has funded the military at higher levels than anybody else. And that is a verifiable historical fact. Who killed the Avro Arrow? Conservatives. Who built the Avro Arrow? Liberals. Who bought these CF-18s? That would be Pierre Trudeau to replace the aging Voodoos. Now, the F-35 deal was struck up. Did that begin under Chrétien and then go through Harper? And then, because it's been going on for quite some time.
Yeah.
And I know people are talking about canceling it, and Trudeau had originally said he wanted to cancel the F-35 deal. But I think after he discovered that there are millions of jobs tied into the supply chain for that aircraft that we actually helped develop, yeah, that contract won't be torn up at all. But historically speaking, the Conservatives are not good fiscal managers, and the Conservatives have harmed the Canadian military. And that's as simple as it is.
That's absolutely true.
It's that simple. So for Pierre Poilievre to act like a tough guy, which is really funny.
Mm-hmm.
It's really funny.
As you can see, Kits and Kubs, you have the story of what happened with Trump and Zelensky. You have the story about where the Conservatives are in the polls. You have the story about the Prime Minister being in Europe, having this very important meeting with the Coalition of the Willing. And then you have this Pierre conference. And all four events, if you look at them individually in a silo, look completely unrelated.
Mm-hmm.
And you can make a case saying, well, no, that's different like this. But when you connect them, when you put them all together, how does this relate to that? Yes. What happened on Friday, you know that happened on Friday, and you know that governments are going to ask you to react to this, particularly in Canada that has the largest Ukrainian diaspora in the world. You are going to be asked. At the same time, you have this polling thing coming up, which feels that you need to come up and preempt that. And during the preemption part, notice that in all this prepared statement, we didn't show you the prepared statements all that much, but there's hardly any mention whatsoever of anything Ukraine in the prepared statements. And the prepared statements, he basically again claimed that everybody else agrees with his ideas on how to fight tariffs, even though, as we've made very clear on the show, he was the last to reveal his plan. And when he did, it was just a collage of things that everybody else had already said and the already agreed upon consensus course of action. Then, of course, he claimed many measures that the Liberals should have taken by now, but those measures are ones that would require Parliament to be open and operating productively, something that was not the case when it was not prorogued, and something to which Pierre will not commit if reopened. So when he says, we could do this, we should be doing this, we could have done this, it's all nonsense because he would not allow any of that to happen. Right? We get the Brookfield lie. Carney should stand before us and explain himself, even though it's like, I'm sure you do not want to create the precedent of having to stand before us and explain yourself every time you lie. Because you'd be doing nothing but that. During his press conference, his prepared remarks, don't worry, Canada's abusive boyfriend did to make sure to make time to tell us all the ways that we're worthless and broken and nobody will love us. He did that. I guess keeps on talking about how our economic growth is the worst and that we're lagging behind everyone. I decided to go check that. Actually, because there was news that came up that fourth quarter results showed 2.6% growth, and 2.6% growth is pretty good because everybody talks about trying to hit that 3% that's almost mythical, right? That crazy growth. Well, it turns out that when 2.6 was announced, figures are announced first and then they're revised a couple of months later. So Q3, which had come in at 1.0% growth at the time, was actually revised upwards to 2.2. And Q2, which was actually came in at 2.2, was revised upward to 2.8.
So
in the most
almost
recent
the
data.
3% growth that they're predicting are wish to attain. And how did the other nations in the G7 do, comparatively speaking, sir?
I am glad you asked that, Mr. Grizzly, because that's specifically what I went to look. And by the way, Q1 numbers had come in at 1.7, but they had been previously revised to 1.8 at the beginning of the year. So, and at the beginning of the year, growth for Canada was predicted to come in at 1.6% for 2024. Well, if Q1 is 1.8, Q2 is 2.8, Q3 is 2.2, and Q4 unrevised is 2.6, and all three previous quarters numbers have been revised upwards, either slightly or by a lot. That's way above 1.6 for the year, right? So I thought, that's interesting. I should go and check that. So I went to the International Monetary Fund's website.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, and I looked at the 7 nations of the G7, and I looked at an aggregate overall number for advanced economies. All the advanced economies
on top.
Now, if I'm looking at these numbers here, I see that France's GDP growth up until October 2024 was measured as 1.1% for the year. Germany, 0.8% for the year. Japan, 1.1%. Italy, 0.8%. The United Kingdom, 1.5%. The United States, 2.2%. All of the advanced economies as a block, 1.8%. And Canada, 2.4%.
So, according to Pierre Poilievre, we're broken and the economy is suffering, but it's growing faster than any other in the G7.
And the group of all economic advanced countries.
So please make that make sense to me. How can he lie like that and get away with it?
I'm guessing Pierre did not update his Canada's broken numbers to reflect the most recent numbers made available by Statistics Canada.
So it would seem. We got to wrap up, sir, but I just wanted to share something with you quickly because I thought this was kind of interesting. I'm going to put this on the screen. I'll let you have a look at it, and then for the folks at home who are listening. And this one just makes me chuckle horribly. Just horribly, happily, I don't know. It just makes me laugh because, oh my goodness. So this gentleman called The Dark at PMA Tribe tweeted to the truck driver plebe, "What do you make of all these polls that have the Liberals leading now?" And truck driver plebe, the plebe reporter as he likes to call himself, responds with, "I think they are purposely oversampling university-educated Canadians."
Who were they oversampling before, pleb? And then who were they oversampling when you were winning, pleb?
So what he's saying is conservatives are dumb. I guess. Isn't that what he's saying?
Because for this to be true, pleb also needs you to believe that polling companies whose results, methodology, and data are their calling card. So it's kind of important for them to get that right because they like repeat and continued business. Because if you start skewering your polls in that way, then your data is not reliable, especially when it compares to what actually happens. And then your poll rating goes down, then and fewer people hire you. So pleb wants you to believe that polling companies, which are businesses and profit-driven, would do things deliberately to kneecap their ability to earn profits just to show the Liberals winning after 2 years of showing the Conservatives winning by a lot. Couldn't possibly be that the moment has passed this guy by. Has to be rigged.
Well, and just one more final tidbit for you here that is truly troubling, and this is from Axios. And I read about this yesterday, and I thought, is this real? Yeah, it's real. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, former Fox News weekend anchor, has ordered U.S. Cyber Command to suspend offensive cyber and information operations against Russia, according to multiple reports. Do you not see a big problem with that? Because I sure as hell do. Don't look at Russia anymore. No. Cyber Command, don't look at Russia. Don't look at any of their propaganda or any of the things they're doing. Just leave them be. We can trust them. When I said on Friday the world order that we've known since 1945 ended, I legitimately meant that. 80 years of a specific world order came crashing down in a, 5-minute chat in the Oval Office. It's over. It's done. The United States of America is owned by Vladimir Putin. It's finished. Yeah. It's finished. Say goodbye. It's like this is unprecedented. Isn't the word that fits here? I don't know what word would fit here.
Mm-hmm.
This is just beyond.
Yep. And when Pierre's talking about the energy superpower thing, just remember, kids and cubs, that this is a regular reminder that the conservative plan for climate change and or meeting our energy needs, because they both kind of come together, is hoping/praying that someone somewhere someday invents something that will work. And then the people hoping and praying that a conservative government that would be in place at the time would actually put money into deploying this something that someone somewhere invented someday. And one of the things that they put all their hope in is climate capture and storage, which, again, we don't really have major big ones yet. And Harper was touting that back in his day as the solution. And now the latest one is SMRs, right? Small little nuclear reactors. Just a little note, New Brunswick Power CEO now unsure if first SMR will be ready by late 2030s. By late 2030s.
Right.
So the conservative plan is like, just wait until we get small and medium nuclear reactor technology perfectly fine. And then we'll be able to do something to just go, well, right now we're looking that we're not sure if they'll be ready by late 2030s. So we're supposed to just tread water for the next 15 years or so until someone invents that. That's the solution. And we don't have to change our behavior at all until then, because somebody will invent somebody someday. Science, which conservatives really believe in, will save us. Okay. Kids and Cubs. Mr. Grizzly, do we have a show?
We do.
Yeah, we do. So all these things that seemingly are unrelated are actually very, very, very related. So you really have to pay attention, kids and cubs. That's the end of this episode of the Daily Beaver Morning Show. We hope that you love listening to us because we love making this for you. Remember, sharing is caring and word of mouth is priceless. So please tell your peeps and poops all about us. Now, if you'd like to make sure that you do not miss an episode, especially in our podcast version, the QR code that has just appeared will bring you to our pod page, podpage.com/The True North Eager Beaver with a hyphen between each one of those words. Thanks to the Ray Girl. If you go there, click subscribe. When we have something fresh off the bandwidth, it comes directly to you. Now, if you'd like to support us in other ways, for example, you can go to the True North Eager Beaver Media Incorporated YouTube page, and we have 3 buttons there: like, share, and subscribe. Lick them, click them, flick them. It makes us happy and really helps us with the algorithm. And Kits, Elaine, and Cassie would very much approve. So please do it. We really, really appreciate it. If you would like to help us in another way, for example, maybe financially, because we do incur some costs to bring this show to you. And if you would like to help us with that because you like our product and you would like to encourage us to do more, we would be very, very, very grateful for your support. The QR code that's appeared by Mr. Grizzly's head will bring you to the Emergency Hydration Fund here at the Beaver Lodge, as we affectionately call it, but it is technically our tip jar. So if you would like to go there, that's ko-fi.com/eagerbeaver, all in one word. And if you would like to make sure that a token of your appreciation is left there, we would be very grateful for that. Thank you so very much. Now, if you're not able to contribute financially, please do not worry, because the gifts of your attention and participation are the ones that matter the most to us, and we love to hear from you. truenortheagerbeaver@gmail.com is where you can write us. And if you would like to donate to us as well without having to go through PayPal or the CEO Bros, that type of stuff, because you want to keep your donation 100% Canadian, that's why you do it. A direct transfer sent to truenortheagerbeaver@gmail.com will do the trick for you. Now, if you do want to write to us, you can also reach us at the Blue Sky Beaver Lodge at True Eager, at the Bad Place, also at True Eager, on our Facebook page, True North Eager Beaver. And hey, if you're watching on YouTube with the damn fam, right down here in the comments section, leave us a little something. Let us know what you think. We do try to read everything. Thank you so much. Your comments do make the show better. Because democracy is something that you do. There's a liberal leadership race in Quebec going on. There is the federal liberal leadership race. Again, do what you need to do to make sure that you have verified your status to be an eligible voter when voting starts. I believe it has already started as well. So get your vote in. So verify your identity and get your vote in. I'm still going to have to figure out how to do that because I still have not been sent anything. So I don't know if they're dealing people in a certain order and then they're coming or what, but I haven't. So I'm probably going to have to go and figure out how to do it before the deadline because I do want to vote. There is a by-election, of course, I think a provincial by-election in Manitoba coming up, and it has just been announced as well that there will be a federal by-election in the province of Quebec, which is coming for April, which is kind of interesting. But of course, if an election is declared prior to that, of course, the by-election won't hold, and the election date will just be that from that one. All right. I think that's all I got for the democracy, something that you do section. Mr. Grizzly, do you have some words of wisdom?
Not today, man. I'm just tired. I'm just really tired and rather brainless at the moment. I got to take out Lola in a minute here, so just dress warmly because it's a little chilly in the nation's capital, but it's going to warm up over the next few days. I'm going to see if I can get out on the canal before it gets closed, because it looks like over the next few days it's supposed to warm up to +4, which means that will be the end of the canal for the season. So maybe I can get out there today at some point. Anyway.
Good. The latest federal by-election is for Halifax for the seat that the now mayor of Halifax, Mr. Fillmore, has vacated in order to run for City Hall. So it would take place on April 14th if there's not an election declared prior to that.
Okay.
All right. Mr. Grizzly, please cue the cock. You are listening to a True North Eager Beaver Media Incorporated podcast. The True North Eager Beaver podcasts are proudly brought to you by our founding sponsors, the Misfit Mysteries from Corvid Moon Publishing, your source for science fiction, fantasy, and cozy mysteries featuring a broad diversity of characters, CanadianTarot.com, their uniquely Canadian online eclectic tarot community, and the Peppermaster, hot pepper sauces made from farm fresh ingredients to thrill your taste buds and expand your mind. We are grateful to the Crier Media Network for its support, Pete Jarvis for our artwork, and Paul Joseph Something for our opening and closing sequence music. All right. Do you have any Easter eggs, Mr. Grizzly?
There was one I was thinking about sharing, but it's well, what the heck? I'll share it. Just give me a second here. It's one of those ones where you need to see it because listening to it won't work as well because there are subtitles. But it's still it's worth a chuckle, and I think you'll enjoy this.
We now take you to the Trump-Macron press conference already in progress.
If it did start, it should have stopped the first week, not 3 years later. Okay?
Je vais répondre, if you allow me, because I had just, je pense que plusieurs questions.
Allow me to speak in French. That way, he won't know what I'm talking about. I'll just use a calm tone of voice, like I'm talking to a dog. The president's response to Russia's invasion of Ukraine is reminiscent of the old French classic Ratatouille. Of course, Putin is the rat, controlling our mushy-brained friend here like a puppet by tugging on his I want to say hair, but instead of making a delicious French stew, they are making an authoritarian souffle. Finally, anyone who would side with a murderous dictator is, as the French say, a douche baguette.
I have no idea what he's saying, but that is the
Okay, we're gonna get dinged for that, but that's
Oh
okay.
yeah. I'll have to cut it later, but it was funny. I just thought I'd show it. I didn't realize that there was a narration as well. I thought it was just subtitles, so everybody can hear that. So that worked out well. All right,
absolutely perfect. All right, have a terrific day, everyone, and watch The Briar.
Sure.
Oh, and happy Ramadan to those who are observing.
Oh yeah, it is Ramadan. That's right. Yeah.
Oh, hold on, wait a minute. And I think it's playing with 3D's birthday as well.
I don't
So
know.
happy birthday.
All righty.
All right.